My name is Vivian Clark, and I still remember the day Camille stepped into our lives. She wore a blood-red coat, designer heels, and a smile so perfect it looked painted on. My father, still grieving my mother's death, was mesmerized. He called her a second chance at happiness. But I felt it in my bones. She didn't belong. Her eyes scanned the house like she was already redecorating, already calculating. I was 15, but I wasn't blind. She acted sweet, doting, supportive, but only when Dad was around. When we were alone, her warmth vanished, and I saw the woman behind the mask, cold, cunning, and quietly territorial. At first, I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, that I was just a bitter teenager missing her mother. But Camille made it hard to pretend. She started with the little things, removing Mom's pictures from the hallway, replacing the bedding, giving away her jewelry under the excuse of My father didn't notice. He was lost in her charm. She cooked for him, massaged his ego, flattered him constantly. And behind that domestic bliss, I was slowly being erased. I'd catch her watching me sometimes, just watching with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Like a queen assessing a threat to her throne, Camille was good to good. She learned Dad's routines, his moods, his weaknesses. She mirrored him perfectly. If he was passionate about wine, suddenly she was a connoisseur. If he was stressed about work, she'd surprise him with a home-cooked meal and soft jazz playing. In the background, she became indispensable, like a shadow that wrapped around him tighter every day. And I, the daughter he once called his heartbeat, became background noise. I tried to talk to him. I tried to tell him how I felt. But Camille always intervened. Always redirected the conversation, always played the role of concerned peacemaker. One evening, I overheard them talking. Dad was saying he wanted to set up a trust for me, something to secure my future. Camille laughed softly, telling him he was spoiling me too much. She needs to learn independence, she said. It's what her mother would have wanted. That name, my mother's name, coming from her mouth felt like a slap. My fists clenched. I wanted to run in, scream at her, tear off her mask, but I didn't. Because I knew how this worked. Camille was smart. She never crossed the line where Dad could see it. Her venom was reserved just for me, behind closed doors. Holidays turned into performances. Camille bought extravagant gifts for me, then whispered later that I was ungrateful. She'd throw family dinners with my father's business partners and conveniently forget to invite me. If I complained, she'd twist it, make it seem like I was the one causing drama. And Dad, he believed her. Slowly, the bond between us began to crack. He was working longer hours, tired, leaning on Camille for emotional support. She made sure she was the only one he could trust. I watched her take everything, his love, his time, his attention, and I stood by helplessly, holding the memories of what we once had. High school graduation came and went. My father wasn't there. Camille said he had an urgent meeting, but something in her tone told me it was deliberate. That night, she handed me a gift, a leather-bound planner. Time to plan your own life, she said. No warmth, no sincerity, just a sharp smile that said, you're on your own now. I went to my room and cried for hours. Not because she was cruel, but because I knew I was losing. She was winning, and the girl who once had a home, a family, a future, was becoming an outsider in her own life. I started journaling every encounter, every whisper, every calculated insult. I didn't know why. Maybe it was a way to cope. Maybe it was a subconscious attempt to build a case. Camille never touched my notebooks. She thought I was beneath her, just a moody teenager with nothing to offer. But I was watching. I was listening. I was documenting. I saw the way she flirted with my father's business partners. I heard her late-night phone calls behind locked doors. I smelled the perfume on his clothes that wasn't hers. It was all pieces of a puzzle I didn't fully understand yet, but I was storing them. Waiting. By the time I turned 20, the house no longer felt like mine. Camille had remodeled it completely. My childhood room was turned into a yoga studio. The walls that once held my mother's laughter now echoed with hollow sophistication. My father looked older, weaker, always tired. And Camille, she looked untouched by time. Thriving, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because something inside me knew. Her game had a limit. People like her always go too far. And when they do, they slip. I was waiting for that moment. For the crack in her perfect porcelain skin. And when it came, I would be ready. Then it happened. My father fell ill, pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis shattered me. But Camille, she cried in public, then smiled in private. She began managing his accounts, making his appointments, taking over every detail of his life. I offered to help, but she pushed me out. "He needs calm," she'd say. "You just upset him," and once again, I was sidelined. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't fight. I watched. Because I knew. If she was heartless enough to take advantage of a dying man, she was heartless enough to steal everything he had. And I wasn't going to let her. By now, the illusion of family had fully shattered. Camille wasn't a stepmother. She was a usurper, a thief in designer clothing. And I was no longer the fragile daughter she once dismissed. I was becoming something else, sharper, colder, more patient. I had learned from her. I had studied her. And as my father's health declined, I promised myself one thing. She might win for now, but the end wasn't hers to write. She didn't know what I knew. She didn't know who I was becoming. And when the truth finally surfaced, it would drown her. Slowly, completely, and very, very publicly. The morning my father died, the house was silent, too silent. No grieving prayers, no family around the bed, just Camille, standing at the window in her silk robe, sipping coffee like it was any other day. I arrived an hour later, breathless, broken, shaking. She turned to me and said, "He's gone," with a calmness that pierced through me. No tears. No tremble in her voice. I wanted to scream, to collapse at his bedside. Instead, I stood frozen, watching her place the mug down and walk past me like I was a stranger. That moment told me everything. He was gone, and I no longer mattered. The funeral came and went like a business transaction. Camille handled every detail, picked the suit he'd be buried in, chose the guest list, rejected my input on the eulogy. "It's better to keep it simple," she said with that polished fake concern. I watched her deliver a speech at the service, acting like a grieving widow, thanking everyone for their support. But I saw through it. Her eyes never left the room, calculating, scanning, watching reactions. I sat in the back, clenching my fists, wondering how many people believed the performance. I didn't cry that day, not because I wasn't heartbroken, because I was furious. Days later, Camille summoned me to her attorney's office for the will reading. I wasn't prepared for the blow. I sat in a leather chair, heart pounding, expecting some twisted version of Dad's will, but what I heard shattered me. Everything, every single asset was left to Camille. The house, his company shares, bank accounts, insurance, even personal items he promised to me, like Mom's antique locket and his grandfather's war medals. It was his final decision, her lawyer said flatly. Camille didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her silence was her victory. I walked out of that office feeling erased. I couldn't believe it. My father, the man who once called me his legacy, had left me nothing. No letter, no note. Not even a mention in the will. It didn't make sense. He always talked about securing my future. Always. I remembered the trust fund discussions, the way he worried about my student loans, the trips we planned. And now, silence. I sat on the curb outside the office, the weight of betrayal sinking deeper. But as the shock settled, another thought took root. This wasn't my father's doing. This was Camille's. And if she was bold enough to take everything, she was bold enough to forge it. I tried confronting her that evening. She was sitting on the back patio, sipping red wine, wearing black like it was still a costume. I asked her how she could do it. She blinked slowly, then smiled. "You weren't around. I took care of him. He made his choice." Her words sliced through me, laced with venom wrapped in civility. I wanted to lunge at her, to scream in her face, but I saw the satisfaction in her eyes. She wanted me to lose control. So, I didn't. I turned away. I walked upstairs, packed my few remaining things, and left that house for what I thought was forever. She didn't just steal my inheritance, she stole my goodbye. My last months with my father had been filtered through her lies, her manipulation, her gatekeeping. Every moment I thought he was resting peacefully, she was isolating him, sedating him, signing papers I never saw. I started to question everything. Did he even know what he signed? Was he lucid? Did he try to reach me? Camille kept his phone locked away the last few weeks. Claimed he was too tired to speak. My heart broke over and over, thinking of him possibly calling out for me, and being silenced by the woman who now owned his name. Friends of my fathermen he did business with started reaching out quietly. Some said they were surprised I wasn't included in the will. Others confessed Camille had been unusually present during his final financial meetings. One even hinted That she'd rushed paperwork just before his condition worsened. That's when something shifted in me. Grief gave way to resolve. Camille had played her role perfectly, but perfection cracks under pressure. If she forged documents, if she manipulated legal channels, if she tampered with my father's final decisions, there would be evidence somewhere, and I was going to find it. I owed him that. I owed myself that. I moved into a cheap apartment downtown and used the last of my savings to hire a private forensic lawyer. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't update social media. I went ghost. Camille thought I was gone for good, but every day, I scoured old emails, scanned documents, reached out to contacts, tracked down former employees, and pulled records from storage. The deeper I went, the more suspicious things became. Transactions dated days after my father was bedridden, power of attorney documents with shaky signatures, and then, I found a copy of an older will in a storage unit I didn't even remember renting. A will that named me sole heir. My breath caught. The signature was clean, notarized, dated 3 months before his death. The newer version, Camille used it, was dated 2 weeks before his passing, the time he could barely hold a pen. That was the crack. The flaw in her masterpiece. I contacted a handwriting analyst. It took weeks, but the results came back just as I expected. The signature on her will was forged. Camille had rewritten history. But now, I had the truth. I didn't feel joy. I felt justice rising. The cold goodbye she handed me was about to be colder, sharper, and in front of the world. The day I handed the documents to my lawyer, I felt my pulse steady for the first time in months. I wasn't just grieving anymore, I was fighting. For my father's honor. For my name. For everything Camille tried to steal under the veil of elegance and sorrow. She wore pearls and painted herself as the tragic widow, but underneath was a fraud, and I was done being silent. The courtroom would be my battleground. Her lies would be my ammunition. And when it was all over, the world would finally see her for what she truly was. Camille had wrapped her lies in silk and sympathy, but truth has a way of surfacing even through marble. I didn't just stumble upon my father's original will, I unearthed it. Hidden in a safety box under my name, buried beneath old tax returns and faded letters from my mother. As the first held that document, my hands trembled not from shock, but from vindication. The signature was clean. The terms were crystal. I was to inherit everything. Camille wasn't even mentioned. My father hadn't forgotten me. He had tried to protect me, and now, with that truth in my hands, I knew what had to come next: exposure. I started building the timeline. I needed to know when she switched the will, how she did it, and who helped her. The dates didn't lie. Camille submitted the altered will just 12 days before my father passed. According to hospice records, he was heavily sedated during that time. The nurses said he barely opened his eyes. I tracked down a former housekeeper, Maria, who remembered seeing a notary visit late one evening. Canonile had asked her to leave early that night. That notary turned out to be her cousin. Conflict of interest, absolutely. Legal grounds for suspicion. Even better. The puzzle was assembling itself piece by piece. Her manipulation wasn't just emotional, it was surgical. Camille forged the signature with practiced precision. I had it analyzed against known samples of my father's writing. The forensic handwriting expert was clear. This isn't your father's signature. It's an imitation. I stared at the report for hours, memorizing every detail. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was criminal, fraud, forgery, theft. She didn't make a mistake, she committed a crime. And while she wore black luncheons and whispered grief into wine glasses, I was sharpening the blade of truth she thought she'd buried forever. The mask was slipping. All I had to do was rip it off. I revisited the house under the guise of collecting old belongings. Camille didn't suspect a thing. She poured me tea, smiled as if the past hadn't scorched our relationship, and tried to play the elegant widow. But I wandered. I opened drawers. I checked filing cabinets. And in the back of a locked desk drawer, I found them: receipts, bank slips, wire transfers. Large sums moved into offshore accounts, payments to legal consultants, notaries, and a sudden life insurance policy adjustment dated 3 weeks before my father's diagnosis. My heart raced. Camille hadn't just wanted control. She planned it, calculated it, engineered every move like a queen in a silent war. I took photos of everything, digital backups, paper copies, organized them by date, by transaction, by contact. I became obsessed, sleeping in 2-hour shifts, eating whatever was nearby, barely speaking to anyone. Revenge wasn't just an emotion anymore. It was a process. Camille had crafted her world on fraud and forged trust, and now I was going to collapse every brick she laid. Every document I uncovered felt like a match. I just needed the courtroom to be the gasoline. I didn't want vengeance in private. I wanted her mask to melt in public. I wanted the applause to be hers. When the cuffs clicked shut, the notary cousin broke first. My lawyer reached out with a quiet offer, immunity in exchange for testimony, and she folded. Said Camille pressured her, threatened family secrets, even promised her a slice of the estate if she kept quiet. The statement was signed, notarized, and tucked into my legal arsenal. I remember staring out the window that night, watching the rain. For the first time, I smiled not because it was over, but because it was starting. Camille had buried her secrets like bones. But I was digging with fire, and the storm I was building would not be one she could hide from. I contacted the estate lawyer, who originally handled my father's business affairs. He was stunned. He'd been mysteriously dismissed a month before Dad's condition worsened. Camille said they were downsizing, but emails between them proved otherwise. She pushed him out, replaced him with a family friend. Someone easy to influence. I forwarded everything to my legal team. They said it was more than enough to open a case. Fraud, will tampering, elder financial abuse. Camille had played her game flawlessly until now. The story she wrote for herself was unraveling, and I was holding the pen, one signature at a time. I was rewriting the ending. The trial date was set. Camille was served in front of her friends at a high-profile charity event. I wanted it that way. Her face went pale, lips stiff, camera shutters clicking as she accepted the papers with a trembling hand. The silence that followed her exit was exactly the beginning of what I promised her. Public humiliation. She wanted to be the face of legacy, of luxury. Now, she was going to be the face of deception. The press would come. The truth would speak. And the courtroom wasn't just going to expose her lies. It was going to redefine who she really was. The days leading to the hearing were a blur of interviews, depositions, and mounting pressure. Camille tried to play innocent. She even cried during her first appearance, but the evidence didn't weep. It screamed. Witnesses, documents, and timelines all pointed in one direction: fraud. My attorney delivered each fact like a blade, slicing through her illusion. And Camille, she stopped speaking. Her eyes stayed down. Her lawyers began to fidget. She was cornered. The judge looked at the signatures, compared them to certified records, and shook his head. Her lies weren't just uncovered, they were dissected, shredded, destroyed. She wasn't a widow. She was a thief. As I stepped outside that courthouse, the sky split open with thunder. Poetic. Justice wasn't a flum, it was a flood. I had exposed the woman who tried to erase me. I had dug up every secret she buried under charm and calculation. And now, with the truth echoing in the halls she once ruled, I finally felt peace, not the peace of winning, but the peace of knowing my father's name would not be remembered with lies. His legacy was mine again. And Camille, she was nothing more than a ghost in silk, a queen deposed by the daughter she thought she buried. The courtroom wasn't just a place. It was the stage where Camille's perfect world would collapse. I walked in calm, collected, dressed in black like armor. She sat across the aisle, flawless as ever, draped in designer mourning, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Her performance was beginning to slip. The cameras were outside now. Reporters, curious onlookers, whispers of scandal. She had spent years crafting an image of elegance, loyalty, and charm. But no amount of perfume could mask the stench of fraud. As the judge entered and the room rose, I felt that this was no longer a fight for justice. It was the unveiling of a parasite. Camille's defense leaned on theatrics. Her lawyer painted her as a devoted wife who honored her late husband's wishes. She dabbed her eyes with tissue. But when the forensic analyst took the stand, her poise began to crack. The expert confirmed under oath that the signature on the final will was forged. Not speculated, not suspected, confirmed. Her hands tightened in her lap. Her lips pressed flat. Still, she didn't look at me. The judge leaned forward. "Are you aware forging a legal document constitutes criminal fraud, Mrs. Clark?" She stammered. I signed what I was told. Lies don't sound so pretty under oath. Then came the notary cousin's testimony. The courtroom tensed. She admitted Camille pressured her, blackmailed her, offered money to notarize a false will while my father was bedridden. Gasps filled the room. Camille's mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Her voice rose, desperate. She's lying. She's just jealous. But it was too late. Her own blood betrayed her to save herself. The judge ordered silence. I sat still, watching her unravel. This wasn't just justice, it was collapse. For years, she ruled like a queen, untouchable, untouchable. Now, she looked small, like a child caught stealing from her father's drawer. And the courtroom saw it. More witnesses followed. Maria, the housekeeper, spoke of being dismissed the night the will was signed. Financial advisors confirmed Camille's suspicious control over accounts. Emails were presented, ones where Camille requested information about forging documents, encrypted under fake names but traced to her IP address. Everything lined up. Her lies weren't clever anymore, they were predictable. Her lawyers fumbled. She whispered frantically in their ears. But I didn't move. I wanted her to see I wasn't angry. I was finished. I had built my case with eyes not fire, and it burned her even more, knowing she couldn't stop what was unfolding in front of everyone she once fooled. During recess, reporters flooded outside. Microphones caught whispers of fraud, stolen inheritance, and widow exposed. Camille's friends, once defenders, began to distance themselves. Her charity board quietly removed her name. She tried to hold on, to maintain some dignity. But dignity doesn't survive exposure. By the end of the second day, her legal team requested a settlement offer. My attorney laughed. She doesn't set the terms now. We pressed forward. I wanted a ruling. I wanted the judge's words on record. I wanted the verdict to follow her like perfume used to only this time. It would reek of disgrace. Closing arguments were clinical. The facts stood tall. The truth didn't need emotion, it had structure, evidence, names, timelines. My lawyer looked Camille straight in the eyes as she spoke of betrayal, deceit, and exploitation of a dying man. Camille tried to look away, but the courtroom held her. She wasn't just being stripped of assets, she was being unmasked. The judge's final words were seared into my memory. This court finds the defendant guilty of will tampering, financial fraud, and unlawful misrepresentation of estate documents. All assets are to be returned to the legal heir Vivian Clark. Just like that, her empire crumbled. She didn't cry. Not immediately. She froze, as if her soul left her body for a moment, stunned that the world she'd built with lies had fallen so fast, so publicly. I watched her walk out in silence. No cameras now, no applause. Just a woman who gambled on deception and lost everything. She passed me without a glance. I didn't stop her. She wasn't worth a final word. Her silence was louder than any scream. Justice doesn't always come with thunder. Sometimes, it walks quietly, wearing heels, carrying truth like a sword. And in that silence, I took back what was mine. The days after the verdict were surreal. Journalists wanted interviews. Former friends of my father reached out with apologies, support, and relief. The inheritance was transferred. The estate returned. I walked through my childhood home again, not as an intruder but as the rightful heir. I touched the frame of my mother's photo. I whispered a promise to my father, that I had kept my word. Camille's possessions were boxed and shipped to whatever hole she crawled into. The world moved on quickly, but I didn't forget. I didn't forgive. Because unmasking someone isn't just about truth, it's about making sure they never wear that face again. And Camille, she vanished from society. Her name became cautionary. Her friends disappeared. The social clubs removed her photos. She moved to a modest apartment outside the city, quiet, unseen, uninvited. They say she applied for work under a different name. Some whispered she tried to sue the cousin who testified against her. Nothing stuck. Nothing could. Her power was gone, drained from the spotlight she once bathed in. I sometimes wonder if she still looks in the mirror and sees the woman she once pretended to be, or if now, at last, she sees the thief behind the pearls and perfume. The truth is, Camille took everything, my father's final days, his voice, his wishes. But in exposing her, I reclaimed more than just money. I reclaimed my family's legacy. I reclaimed myself. She tried to silence me, erase me, replace me. But she underestimated the one thing she couldn't manipulate: truth. And truth, once unleashed, doesn't just burn, it buries. And Camille Clark Beatty Court's ruling was final, but for me, the real victory came in silence. I stood outside the courthouse, wind cutting through my coat, and watched Camille disappear into the back seat of a cab. No cameras, no allies, no dignity. Just a shadow of the woman who once held my life in her hands. Everything she built on. Deceit had collapsed. Her bank accounts were frozen. Her social ties severed. The designer handbags, the whispered power, the fake warning all meaningless now. She fell like every manipulator eventually does. Quietly, swiftly, completely. And me. I didn't just survive her storm. I stood above it. Returning to my father's home felt like stepping into a ghost story I had finally rewritten. The furniture still bore her choices. The walls echoed with her false laughter. But room by room, I began reclaiming it. I restored the study he loved, pulled his journals from the attic, placed my mother's photo back on the mantle. I wasn't just moving in, I was resurrecting the soul of the house. The business, too, came back to me. I renamed the foundation, in his honor, made donations to the Cancer Institute, and restructured his legacy, not as Camille's trophy but as my father's truth. People started treating me differently, not because I won, but because I endured. Strangers who once doubted me now respected me. Lawyers asked to publish the case. Families reached out, telling me they suspected similar frauds. I didn't expect to become a voice for others, but I welcomed it. What Camille tried to erase became a platform for justice. I started speaking at estate planning seminars, helping families protect what matters. And every time I shared my story, I felt her power shrink a little more. Her fall wasn't just legal, it was social. And my rise wasn't about revenge, it was about legacy. I never sought headlines, but they came anyway. Widow exposed in multi-million-dollar inheritance fraud. Daughter fights back and wins. My face appeared on blogs, magazines, even a podcast, but I stayed grounded. I remembered the pain, the nights I cried with rage, the hours I spent staring at forged documents, wondering if justice would ever come. I didn't let the attention change me. I didn't chase fame. I chased healing. Camille may have worn the crown once, but I built the kingdom she tried to steal. A kingdom grounded in truth, not deception. And that truth gave me something far more powerful than pity, purpose. She didn't vanish entirely. I'd hear whispers about her attempting odd jobs, trying to remarry, seeking sympathy, but her name was poison now. Every door she knocked on had already heard the truth. People remembered. Fraud follows you like a stain. And Camille, she lived with the weight of every lie, every signature, every stolen glance she used to manipulate. Her fall wasn't just financial, it was identity, and that was the justice no court could hand down, watching a woman who lived for image lose it all. Her silence was no longer power, it was punishment. And every day she woke up forgotten was a sentence. Years passed, but I never forgot the details. The crack in her voice when the signature was exposed. The stiffness in her spine as the judge read the verdict. The way she avoided my eyes when everything collapsed. These memories aren't bitter, they're sacred. They remind me of how far I climbed after being pushed off the edge. I rebuilt my life, not with rage, but with resolve. I bought property. In my name, I learned the laws she broke. I strengthened the business. And in doing so, I became everything she never wanted me to be. Untouchable, independent, and unforgettable. One day, I received a letter unsigned, no return address. It was Camille. I recognized her handwriting immediately. The contents were short. No apology. No confession. Just a pathetic string of excuses and the line, "You'll always remember me." She was right, but not in the way she hoped. I remember her as a warning, not a wound. A cautionary tale, not a villain. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some people don't deserve closure. They deserve consequence. And she was living hers every day, in silence, in obscurity, in the shadow of the woman she tried to destroy and failed. My story isn't just one of revenge, it's one of reclamation. I reclaimed my name, my dignity, my family's legacy. I learned that strength isn't loud, it's quiet persistence. Camille tried to steal everything, but she only taught me how to fight harder, stand taller, and see through the masks people wear. My rise wasn't a revenge fantasy, it was a rebirth. I didn't just win in court. I won in life. And I did it without becoming her. That's what she never understand. Power isn't about control, it's about character. And in the end, I had what she never could: fabricate integrity. Sometimes I visit my father's grave and read to him from the journal I kept during the trial. I tell him about the company's success, the foundation in his name, the lives we're helping. I tell him how his voice guided me even when I felt lost. And though he's gone, I feel his pride in the wind, in the silence, in the strength I carry. I walk away from those visits with no tears, only peace.